The NFL is kicking off the season with two huge matchups. Thursday, September 5th, it's Ravens at Chiefs on NBC and Peacock. Then on Friday, yes, the following day, live from Brazil, it's Packers versus Eagles, only on Peacock. We're taking our first break. More bold predictions are ahead.
I think we should always make a peacock noise whenever we promote Peacock.
I'm down. We'll do it all year.
I think that's what a peacock sounds like.
Yeah, we actually can't confirm
sound
that.
like some animal, though.
Wait, someone get me a peacock sounder. What's an actual peacock sound like?
Wide receivers and tight ends after this.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. That's right, football is back, and because of that, football fans drink for free today. I'm Connor Rogers alongside Jay Croucher, and that clapping you hear is Matthew Berry, where the football will start tonight in Kansas City. Matthew, how is it out there? The vibe's high.
The vibes are high. Everyone's excited. Everyone's looking for a three-peat. I just got a coffee with Taylor Swift. She's excited about the game tonight. You know, she's just hanging out, mingling. Absolutely, that's 100% true.
Looking very dapper today.
No,
Matthew.
but listen. In all seriousness, you know, everyone is very excited, as you can imagine. Hopes are high for a three-peat, and you can sort of feel the excitement. There's a lot of Ravens fans. I've seen them as well. So should be an amazing game tonight on NBC and Peacock. Of course, I'm a company man.
We'll have our best bets for you for the game, for Ravens-Chiefs. That'll be towards the end of the show because, listen, it's week one, love-hate. That's why you're really here. Let's waste no time. Jump right into it with the running backs here. And listen, Jay, it's starting off with James Cook against Arizona. This was RB11 in points per game after Joe Brady took over this offense last season.
Yeah, I don't think people think of James Cook as a quintessential kind of workhorse, bell cow type of back, but there are worlds where he could be that this season. The Bills are clearly favored in this game. I think that game script should be favorable to them. And yeah, if they continue to be a kind of run-first type of team, then James Cook, if you can just get rid of kind of the drops and the fumbling issues, then he could be in for a massive game and a massive year.
Matthew?
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, and the other piece of it here is, so Jay is completely right in terms of the usage we expect him to have. Like, I am as a top 7 running back this week as well. The other thing is, and again, you know, it's week one, so we really don't have a ton to go off of. We have some preseason usage. We have what we think will happen, but we also have to think about last year, right? And last year, the Cardinals, no team in the NFL allowed more rushing yards to running backs. No team allowed more fantasy points to running backs. No team allowed more rushes of 10-plus yards than the Arizona Cardinals. So it's an unbelievable matchup for a talented player. Remember, the Bills are 6.5-point favorites, according to our friends at DraftKings. Home favorites by almost a touchdown. I think James Cook gets a ton of work. Top 7 play for me today. This week, I should say.
How about Kenneth Walker making this list against the Broncos, Matthew? All the preseason buzz is that we could finally see Kenneth Walker have a bigger role in the passing game this year.
Yeah, 100%, and I think that's the key, right? We know about the big play ability. I mean, here's the thing about KW3. I call him KW3. Over the last 2 years, Chris McCaffrey is the only guy, literally the only running back with more plays of 20 or more yards than Ken Walker. Like, he's got that big play ability, and we know what Ryan Grubb's going to want to do. Get the ball in your playmakers' hands, let them get yards after the catch, and so I expect Ken Walker to get a lot more work in the passing game. He's obviously going to be the bell cow between the tackles as well. Last year, Broncos allowed 5.2 yards per carry to running backs. That was most in the NFL. They also allowed the second most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Again, Seattle favored at home. I think Ken Walker has a big day in terms of usage. I'm as a top 10 play in week one.
Yeah, Matthew, you mentioned the big playability with Ken Walker. I think as much as he did break some runs last year, like, he didn't break the 60-yard type runs that he was in his rookie season when he finished second in Offensive Rookie of the Year. He had 3 60-plus yard runs that year. Last year, he didn't have a run over 45 yards. So, I mean, it doesn't sound like much, but you just kind of add those 3 runs in. The complexion of his whole season looks different, and just a bit more variance than normal for someone like Ken Walker, just with Ryan Grubb coming in, new offense, new system, and it seems like, yeah, he has workhorse potential.
And of course, as Matthew said, the matchup you just have to love against the Broncos. Seattle, one of the bigger favorites of the week. Sometimes those week one spreads can lie to you, but it's looking good for Kenneth Walker against Denver. Matthew, how about Joe Mixon against the Colts? This is a massive division matchup. Obviously, the Texans trade for Joe Mixon. They paid Joe Mixon, and now they hope to unleash Joe Mixon against a division foe.
Right, and I think, again, I think people don't realize how balanced the Texans' offense was, because all the highlights you saw was Stroud to Nico Collins, Stroud to Tank Dell. But I'm telling you, that was a balanced offense last year, over the second half of the year, especially with Devin Singletary. And now they get Joe Mixon, who I would argue is better than Devin Singletary. Right? It's a nice matchup with the Colts, who allowed the third most rushing touchdowns to running backs last year and the fifth most fantasy points to opposing running backs. But again, this is going to be a balanced offense. And I just think if you're the Colts and you're sitting here like, how are we stopping the Texans? Are we gonna double? Are we gonna load the box to stop Joe Mixon and leave either Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, or Nico Collins in single coverage? Or we're going to play too high deep. We're going to have to play back, and we'll give 5 yards of carry up to Joe Mixon. We just don't want to get beat over the top. My expectation here is they're going to play back. They're going to try to protect against the speed of those Texans wide receivers. You're going to see a light box for Joe Mixon, who should get a heavy workload against the Colts. I have him as a top 12 running back in week 1.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, Connor, is there's this idea that the Texans are going to be this high-flying passing offense. Like, let's see it first, because last year they were 19th in pass rate, over-expected. I thought to a fault Bobby Slowick just leaned on the run too much. Maybe he takes the shackles off year 2 of CJ Stroud, but suspect that, at his core he kind of wants to run the ball, and Mixon will be a beneficiary.
And Jay, it feels like the total for this game on DraftKings has kind of reflected that. There's big expectations for not only the Texans and their pass offense, but also on the other side of the ball, the Colts in this.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, this is a massive game. Like, the Texans are 2.5-point favorites. I mean, it's early, but this is the type of game that can potentially decide and shape a division. So Joe Mixon, again, like a very kind of unsexy pick. Everyone's been drafting Joe Mixon for years now, but in that offense, he should really produce.
Matthew, some others receiving votes here: Devon Achane, Aaron Jones, Jaleel McLaughlin on this list as well. Who really stands out in this one as we get further down the board, especially McLaughlin against Seattle?
Yeah, that's the one I want to highlight here. Achane and Jones, everyone's that's having them is going to start them as well. I mean, Jones, I have him as a top 20 player. Remember, the Giants allowed the third most rush yards to running backs last year. But how about Jaleel McLaughlin, who should have a larger role in this offense? Remember, last year, he was 8th in fantasy points per touch. When Jaleel McLaughlin touches the ball, he is effective. And so, he's also got some big playability. 16% of his rushes gained 10 or more yards. That was 4th among qualified running backs. And so, you think about this offense, they're on the road at Seattle. As you mentioned, Connor, they are big underdogs here. You've got a rookie quarterback, Bo Nix, going into Seattle, one of the toughest places to play in the NFL. If you're Sean Payton, what do you want to do? You want to lean on your run game, try to take pressure off the rookie quarterback. And oh, by the way, if you're trailing, you're going to have to throw. Jaleel McLaughlin is their passing down back. So I think a big second half coming from McLaughlin. So he's just, I think, a good flex play this week, given the matchup and his expected role in this offense. I know you love Audric Estime. I do as well. But I think, at least for week 1, Jaleel McLaughlin is a sneaky start this week.
Yeah, we're going to be a little patient for the Estime show to take over. Let's move over to the hate list here, Jay. Rhamondre Stevenson headlines this against the Bengals. And, I mean, it's as simple as this. The Patriots have the lowest implied team total in Week 1. No Drake May yet. A questionable offensive line at best against a good team in the Bengals.
Yeah, absolutely. Implied team totals 15.5 at Cincinnati. It's obviously going to be the Jacoby Brissett show, for better or worse, in Week 1. And now, look, you can focus on the fact that the Bengals, last year, they didn't have a very good run defense. Rhamondre is largely unopposed in that backfield. But I think this is just a game script play, really. Like, they're going to have to presumably throw to keep up with Joe Burrow. And Rhamondre, I mean, he's going to be touchdown dependent, I think.
Matthew, is the best hope for Rhamondre in this one is that they're trailing and he gets a lot of dump-off passes from Jacoby Brissett?
Obviously, Connor, yeah, I agree with Jay. That's the hope here is you hope Rhamondre Stevenson, if you're having to start him, you hope he falls into the end zone. You hope that we expect them to be trailing, so you're hoping that he's involved in the passing game. But this is one of the concerns that I have about Rhamondre Stevenson, and it's one of the reasons why he was on my preseason hate list. How much is he going to be used in the passing game? Remember, last year, 45% of his fantasy points came from receptions. Well, the Patriots added Antonio Gibson, who is a really good pass-catching running back. And so if they're trailing, if they're in, hurry-up offense, pass offense, is it Rhamondre or is Antonio Gibson out there? By the way, even if they are, how effective will they be? It's worth noting that last year the Bengals were top 10 in the NFL in terms of fewest reception and fewest receiving yards allowed to opposing running backs. So it's a really good defense. Those linebackers play well. I'm nervous about Rhamondre Stevenson. I'm outside my top 25 this week.
How about DeAndre Swift against the Titans here, Matthew? He's coming off a career low in target share last season, and let's call it like it is. This Bears offense is really, really crowded right now in a good way.
It is. Swift could have an awesome game. Look, they paid him in a big way. They want to take pressure off the rookie quarterback. I get all that. And if they do use him in the passing game the way Detroit used him, I mean, like, Philadelphia just completely ignored his passing game ability. We know that DeAndre Swift has that. And so if he gets a lot of work and Caleb Williams dumping off to him, then great, we're all in on DeAndre Swift. The issue is, to your point, Rashawn Johnson and Khalil Herbert, both pretty talented running backs, both saw over 110 touches last year for this same coaching staff, right? For Matt Eberflus, at least, I should say. And then you think about this Titans defense, which the offense struggled last year, but the defense was pretty good. 6th fewest fantasy points to running back last season, top 5 in terms of fewest receptions and receiving yards allowed to running backs. So now you're banking on volume for DeAndre Swift. We just don't know how this backfield is going to play out. Feels like this is going to be a low-scoring game as well. Don't really love it. Just to me, it's week 1. You have no bye issues. Other than Jonathan Brooks, you don't have any really injury issues at running back, and that's a known quantity. So my point is that you should not have to start Swift in a normal league. And so for me, I want to see how this Bears backfield plays out before I'm willing to start him in a week in which you should have everyone available to you.
Yeah, Jay, this is a game with 2 really young quarterbacks and 2 teams that we love the arm talent of Caleb Williams and even Will Levis, but I think both coaching staffs want to protect them a little bit here as well. It could just be kind of a slog, the entire matchup.
Yeah, and to add to Matthew's point around the uncertainty in the backfield, this might surprise some people, but on DraftKings, DeAndre Swift's rushing prop, it's only 41.5 rushing yards, and Khalil Herbert, 29.5. So that's one. They're both very low. They're closely bunched together. So Swift kind of becomes either passing game dependent, and we don't know what his usage is going to be there, or he's touchdown dependent. And I think the Titans, I think their defense is going to be better than last year. They're already a top 12 run defense in EPA per play last year. So I think that just the combination of the uncertainty, good run defense, and what could be an ugly game, I think you can probably do better than DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, Jeffrey Simmons, one of the best defensive tackles in the league, right in the middle of things for Tennessee. Matthew, the last running back that we'll go through on the hate list here, Jerome Ford against Dallas. There was a lot of excitement when Jerome Ford became a big waiver claim, obviously off the unfortunate news of Nick Chubb. But Jerome Ford overall wasn't that effective in fantasy, considering he was the starting Browns running back for a long time last year.
Under 15 points in 75% of his starts last season as well. By the way, once Nick Chubb went down, he saw only 27% of his team's red zone rushes. So the odds of him falling in the end zone aren't great. He's always got the ability to potentially break off a big play, but this game looks ugly to me. Give me the under in this game, Jay. Dallas allowed the 7th fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs last year. It's a great defense. CeeDee Lamb has been out of camp. Dak, the numbers on him at home versus him on the road, really, really stark. And by the way, so Dak on the road isn't great. Cleveland's a very good home defense. They played very well. Deshaun Watson has looked awful this preseason. Is he 100% healthy? This just feels like two offenses that will likely struggle in this game going against 2 good offenses. Just feels like a low-scoring game. And so you've got Jerome Ford, who is going to be part of a committee here on an offense that I don't know that's going to be effective. Yuck. This is not a game I want. You're starting CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson. Of course you are. But Amari Cooper, but Njoku, I guess. But feels like this is a game where if you can avoid it, you want to.
Yeah, Jerome Ford, he's only set a 51.5 rushing yards on DraftKings, so he's probably going to be touchdown dependent. On the other hand, though, Connor, last year, the Cowboys' run defense, wasn't great, completely melted down in the playoffs. They were last in the entire NFL in terms of rushing success rate allowed. They just didn't allow many big runs, so it kind of suppressed their overall. Do you think they're going to be better this year?
It's a huge question mark in 2 places, really the middle of the field. One, former first-rounder Mozzie Smith. He's got to turn the corner at nose tackle for them. Micah Parsons has even been kind of outspoken about this as well. They drafted him to be a big space-eating, 2-gapping guy. He didn't provide that for them year 1. Can he do it in year 2? Then the guys behind him that aren't Micah Parsons. This team has questions at off-ball linebacker. I'm not ready to say it's a weakness yet, but it's a lot of unproven. So we're going to learn a lot about this unit real quickly in Dallas.
Yep, new defensive coordinator as well.
Yeah, who is very, very good. But, how much can you make up for talent deficiencies sometimes?
Yes, yeah. We'll see how he gets along with the players.
That too. Or if he just leaves.
Yeah.
All right, love-hate continues for the pass catchers. Matthew, we start with Mike Evans against your Commanders here.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Connor. If I were to tell you that the Commanders secondary is going to have to play some snaps with Emmanuel Forbes, what would your thoughts be?
I would say it's going to be a very, very long day, or in contrary, a very quick one.
I think it's going to be both. Either way, Mike Evans is going to eat. Like, listen, Rome wasn't built in a day, and there's only so much Dan Quinn can do. We've got some talent deficiencies in that secondary, and Mike Evans, who last year was top 3 in both deep targets and end zone targets last season, they're gonna chuck it to him deep early and often. No team in the NFL allowed more yards to wide receivers than the Washington Commanders. No team allowed more touchdowns on deep passes last year than the Washington Commanders. Like, they're going to chuck it deep. And by the way, they also give the second most fantasy points to wide receivers. Like, it's a bad defense. It's a bad secondary is what it is. Listen, we're going to be haunted by Ron Rivera's choices for a long time. He had 4 years of terrible drafts. And there's only so much that Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, and the new organization, that they can do. Like, they're baby steps, right? And so I actually think the Commanders play tough in this one, but I think it's going to be a sneaky, high-scoring game because I'm not a big fan of either defense here, especially not my Commanders secondary.
And the beauty of that, Jay, is that we've already seen the sample size that Baker Mayfield will just continuously target Mike Evans and give him all those chances for the contested catch situations.
Yeah, and for any of Baker Mayfield's sins, one sin that he doesn't have is that he will chuck it up. Chuck it up, and it's particularly to Mike Evans, obviously, and when there is a suspect secondary. I can still visibly picture some of the Commanders' breakdowns last year. Remember Cooper Kupp just strolling in for like a 60-yard touchdown. So I think that, there will be breakdowns even with the new defense, with Dan Quinn and everything. And Mike Evans, again, he's just like rock solid, kind of like rich man's Michael Pittman. Not excited to draft him, but he's just going to produce. He's still number one receiver in an offense that was competent last year with a competent quarterback.
How about your man, Cooper Kupp, making the love list here against the Lions? I think sometimes it's as simple as this, Jay. Cooper Kupp's healthy and ready to roll.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this all offseason, the fact that Cooper Kupp is being violently underdrafted relative to ADP, while Puka Nacua, my man, being a little bit overdrafted. And to put this in perspective, on DraftKings, Cooper Kupp is set for 68.5 receiving yards, Puka Nacua 72.5. 4 yards difference in projection for a guy, Puka Nacua, who's going as wide receiver 8 in drafts, and Cooper Kupp on ESPN going as wide receiver 22. So we have 14 spots of difference for 4 receiving yards as an over-under. And I think it just highlights the fact that these guys, it's unclear who's going to be the wide receiver 1 on this team. I think there's a very good chance it's Cooper Kupp. Detroit, their defense and their secondary is improved, but they still don't have a lockdown corner that really terrifies you against Kupp.
Yeah, Matthew, you have to like the matchup here. As much as the Lions are, a popular Super Bowl pick on the NFC side, specifically the secondary is beatable, and it's indoors at Detroit.
Exactly. And by the way, they do so much motion with Kupp, and they use him in the slot, and they use to create mismatches. I mean, McVay is a genius about that. And so, Kupp is not somebody that is super guardable. He's just, especially when you put him in the slot, it's just unfair. Look, to your point, Connor, I think you're absolutely right. He's healthy. Last year when he was healthy, 27% target share, right? Last year when he was healthy, he was top 5 in terms of red zone targets per game. Matthew Stafford looks for his guy when they get in close. And so in a game that should be fairly high scoring, it's one of the highest over-unders on the week 1 slate. It's Sunday Night Football on NBC and Peacock. Of course, I'm a company man. So to your point about the Lions secondary, 3rd most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers last year. We expect the Lions to have a really nice offensive game here. Goff, Amon-Ra, Laporta, and Gibbs, et cetera. So the Rams are going to have to throw to keep up. Remember this playoff game last year when Matthew Stafford threw for over 350 yards against the Lions. So we expect some fireworks on Sunday night, and Cooper Kupp's going to be a part of it.
The next player on the love list, Matthew, you just love to see it. Malik Nabers against the Vikings. The Vikings are a team, it's not perfect at corner, and I think the Giants are really excited to unleash their new weapon in Malik Nabers out of the gate.
Yeah, look, the defense got better over the second half of the year, obviously, in terms of Minnesota, but we expect Minnesota to do pretty well against the Giants. And just, again, we've talked about this all preseason as well. Malik Nabers, phenomenal talent, massive target share coming. And, Daniel Jones, again, we will see, but he just needs to get it somewhere near Malik Nabers as well. In his one preseason game that he played, a 33% target share for Malik Nabers, 89% route participation as well. Last year, wide receivers that saw at least 7 targets against the Vikings averaged over 18 fantasy points per game. I wish I could bet on targets, because I'm telling you right now, give me the over on 7 targets for Malik Nabers on Sunday against the Vikings.
Yeah, and the thing with the Giants, and perhaps people haven't been following the Giants too closely this offseason because there's not a ton going on, but if you have been, like myself as a diehard, lifelong New York Giants fan since February 2024, the thing is that has changed is that Brian Daboll is calling the plays now, and the emphasis all throughout preseason has been he wants to air it out, and he wants to chuck it deep. We saw that with Daniel Jones in the preseason, and I think if the offense fails and Daniel Jones is bad, it's not going to be like dink and dunk failing. It's going to be interceptions, and it's going to be a more aggressive offense. I think that helps Nabers, creates more upside for him. The Minnesota secondary is okay, but there's no singular shutdown guy that you're super afraid of. So I think Nabers is going to be peppered with targets, and I think that there is going to be more explosiveness kind of both ways for this offense than people might expect.
A couple others receiving votes here, Matthew. T. Higgins, Christian Kirk, Jayden Reed, Greg Dortch. Of course, Greg Dortch on the list. Pat Freiermuth.
Always.
Hunter, I got to have Greg Dortch on the love list. And Hunter Henry, who jumps out over here?
Well, listen, we'll just talk about the human Dortch. Listen, Bills bottom 5 last year in terms of receptions and catch rate allowed to the slot last season. Greg Dortch averages over 14.6 fantasy points per game when he plays at least 70% of the snaps. He's going to be their full-time slot guy. Just to give you a comparison, last year Chris Olave averaged 14.5. So I like Dortch as a sleeper this week as well. We'll talk about T. Higgins. Look, we don't know as of this taping, we don't know if Jamar Chase is going to play in this game, and if he does, how limited he's going to be. But I would expect that in a game in which the Bengals are heavily favored, T. Higgins gets the majority of the work for New England. Also, deeper leagues, Andre Oshavis as well out of the slot, especially if Chase is out of this game or limited. Last thing I'll mention here, Jayden Reed. That's the Friday night game. It's the Peacock game in Brazil. Packers and Eagles. And Philadelphia last year, most receptions, most yards to the slot, which is obviously where Jayden Reed lines up as well. Both their nickel corners of the Eagles are rookies. Jury is still out on this revamped Eagles secondary. So give me some Jordan Reed this week.
Jay, how about
Jayden Reed. Sorry, not Jordan Reed, not the former Washington tight end great, but Jayden Reed. So, yeah, thanks. Well, love Jordan Reed.
Very fantasy relevant once upon a time.
Yes, he was.
One of your bold predictions, Jay, Hunter Henry could finish as a top 10 tight end. He comes in on the love list this week.
Yeah, I've attached my good name to Hunter Henry in his impending 2024 season. I think with Hunter Henry, the upside here is that, look, they're 8.5-point dogs. They're going to have to be throwing. Jacoby Brissett probably going to throw at someone who's close to him, such as the tight end. And I think that, we talk about last year among tight ends, he was second in terms of red zone targets. I think they're going to need to be throwing. Also, the Bengals defense is very hit and miss, up and down. It wasn't good last year. And so there is some upside for a big play as well for Hunter Henry. So, I like Hunter Henry this week and this year.
Let's go with the hate list here for pass catchers and start with Brandon Aiyuk against the Jets. Matthew misses all the preseason and camp with the contract dispute. And there is a world in this game that we could see Sauce Gardner for the first time in his career, maybe even shadow a little bit. Aiyuk would have the toughest matchup if the Jets opt to go that way.
We don't know what kind of shape he's in. He's missed most of practice, and you're playing the Jets, right? Aiyuk is always a little bit risky just because they have McCaffrey, they have Debo, they have Kittle, right? There are going to be games this year when one of the big four just has a quiet game because there's only so many balls to go around, as it were. But you mentioned the Jets and Sauce Gardner, right? Fewest fantasy points allowed to wide receivers last season, fewest receptions and yards on deep passes. They only allowed 5 touchdowns all last year to wide receivers, and that was in games in which they were getting their butts kicked, right? And so now you've got Aaron Rodgers going into San Francisco where he grew up. He's from the Bay Area. I don't know. Aiyuk makes me nervous this week. You may have to start him given where you drafted him, but just is he going to play a full complement of snaps? I'm not convinced. If he is, how effective is he going to be? By the way, it's not just Aiyuk. It's also Trent Williams. Trent Williams has missed a lot of camp. And so is he going to play every snap out there? And again, boy, you want Trent Williams out there against the Jets defensive line. I'm nervous about Brock Purdy in this game. I think the Jets cover, by the way, Jay. I think the Jets cover this one.
Yeah, no, I like the call. I have Brandon Aiyuk on Slap Them Like a Grape. He will be starting, but with a little reticence because, I mean, this Jets, they probably have the best secondary in the league on paper. It is difficult, like Brandon Aiyuk, who's just being back at practice. Oh, now I got to face Sauce Gardner for the first game, having not practiced a great deal. So, yeah, some concerns. Also, a little undercovered thing, perhaps. Brock Purdy looked horrific in preseason.
Not a great summer.
And I think he's probably going to be fine, but his worst games last year were really emphasized against great defenses. Think about he had no chance against the Cleveland Browns when he faced them. And look, I think Purdy will probably be fine, but if you had to bet on a single elite quarterback from last year to just kind of turn into a pumpkin this year, it would probably be Brock Purdy, right?
I would think so.
Yeah.
He's
I think
at least
fine,
in the list.
but there is some risk that he doesn't back up last year.
Are the markets baking in that Trent Williams and Aiyuk are going to play? Has there been movement since they've been back? How is this all breaking down?
Yeah, so the line was kind of, it opened at Niners -5.5, -6, and then it got all the way down to more the 3.5 range. Now it's back up to 4.5, which I think is reasonable. So I would say that the market is baking in that you're going to get 80% of Aiyuk, and Trent Williams probably plays, but probably doesn't play every snap. Christian McCaffrey, I think, is just full go.
Yeah.
It'll just be, full send. But yeah, with those other two, a little bit of a concern. And this isn't the defense you want to play half-baked.
Our next up here, Matthew, DeAndre Hopkins against the Bears. First off, missed really all the preseason camp as he's had this knee injury where his status is still uncertain for week 1, and also maybe not a great matchup for Hopkins as well.
He's going to see at least some Jalen Johnson for sure. And listen, DeAndre Hopkins, one of my favorite players in the NFL, and I do think he was a value this year in drafts, and I do think he's ultimately going to have a nice year and outperform ADP in Brian Callahan's new push it down the field offense. But it's week 1 on Chicago, and to your point about Will Levis, young quarterback, Chicago's a tough place to play. That is a tough place to play for a young quarterback as well. And so now you've got DeAndre Hopkins, who may not even play in week 1, or if he does, maybe it's limited snaps, hasn't had a chance to really get involved there. It's not a great matchup as well. It's worth noting that Chicago allowed the 9th fewest yards to wide receivers last year as well. So the Titans, who have a bottom 10 implied team total this week, again, we don't expect this to be a high-scoring game between two young quarterbacks in Chicago. DeAndre Hopkins, he's outside my top 35 for the week.
Jay, we heard Matthew before with his concerns offensively with the Cleveland-Dallas game. Jerry Jeudy also shows up on the hate list here for pass catchers. Didn't play in the preseason. He's had a knee injury. And also, we don't know what Deshaun Watson is going to look like going into this year.
Yep, Cowboys elite pass defense as well. They were 5th in pass defense for EPA per play last year. Yes, Deron Bland is out. Stephon Gilmore's gone. I think Gilmore is a massive loss at this stage of his career, but Trayvon Diggs back. He's the best cornerback in that room. He'll play. And with Jeudy, it just comes down to Deshaun Watson, already kind of missing a little bit of time in camp because of just kind of soreness overall. I just think we need to get past the idea that Deshaun Watson is this high variance quarterback who could just turn into 2020 Deshaun. That when he was good, that was back when Carson Wentz was good. So I think that, very concerned about the pass offense for the Browns.
Matthew, our last one here, Dallas Goedert against the Packers in the Brazil game that will be on Peacock. He's missed time during camp with an oblique injury, and the Eagles' offense just continues to get more crowded through the air.
Yeah, look, by all accounts, they're going to use Jahan Dotson. I'll say this for Jahan Dotson, and obviously it was an up-and-down career for him in Washington, but I would argue that he's the most talented third wide receiver the Eagles have had, at least in a long, long time. And so all the words are that Jahan Dotson's going to get used. How much does he get used? I don't know. Is he a fantasy option? He's not. But is he going to get used enough that you were suddenly nervous about Dallas Goedert? Kinda. Worth noting that the Packers last year, top 5 in the NFL in terms of lowest catch rate allowed to opposing tight ends as well. And so the fact of the matter is that we expect this to be a heavy Saquon Barkley game. Obviously, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are going to get theirs. I don't know. I got bad vibes on Goedert in this game, again, especially with the missed time, and I want to see how Goedert's used in this offense. Packers tough against tight ends. Outside my top 12 for the week.
Yeah, Packers very, very athletic and talented at both safety and linebacker. Pretty tough matchup, like you said, for Goedert. The NFL is kicking off the season with 2 huge matchups, and it all starts tonight with the Ravens at the Chiefs on NBC and Peacock. Then tomorrow, yes, Friday game live from Brazil. It's Packers versus Eagles only on Peacock. We're taking our first break. When we're back, love-hate continues. We're talking quarterbacks right after this.
What do you admire most about Lamar when you watch him?
Yeah, I think more than athletic ability and ability to throw is the way he competes. I mean, he's a guy that competes every single week. You can tell he cares. It's not always about talent. It's about you go out there and compete every single week and find ways that whenever you don't have your best stuff, your team doesn't have your best stuff, you find ways to win football games that way.
How much of a relationship, if you have any, with Patrick Mahomes, and just what do you see from him on the field that makes him unique, and what do you take away from his game?
I don't have a relationship with him. I don't think I have a relationship with any quarterback in the league. I don't take anything from him. Anything from him. You know, I just play my game. But he's a great quarterback. I'm gonna say that he's a great quarterback.
Love-hate continues with the quarterbacks. Very different answers, Jay.
Very diplomatic from Lamar Jackson.
Very locked in.
Yeah.
Just feels very locked in.
I don't take anything from anyone. No,
I don't have a relationship with anyone.
Yeah.
He's just lone wolf.
Yep, no, I like it.
I kind of
from
liked
Lamar.
it. It actually helped.
Don't know if there's a bit of a chip on his shoulder in the matchup with Mahomes, because Mahomes has certainly had the better of him over the journey. I mean, the thing is, and I think everyone remembers this, Lamar did not have a good AFC title game. He did not play well in that game against the Chiefs, so I'm sure he'll want to come out and show everyone that, you know, he was the MVP last year for a reason.
Matthew, what did you think of those sounds? It's very different.
Very different. And I would just like to say that I have, a lot of respect for other podcast hosts. You know, I just kind of do my game, and, it's
no relations.
They're all great podcast hosts. I just want to focus on the relationship between me and my microphone.
All right, let's jump into the quarterbacks here, starting with CJ Stroud.
They're not all winners, kids. Yeah, they're not all winners. All right.
Starting with CJ Stroud on the love list. Yes, Matthew.
Some of them are for me. That one was for Leroy. CJ Stroud is a winner, at least for this week as well. I know we made the preseason hate list, but that's for overall value. This week, I think he starts out strong. I'm as a top 5 quarterback as well. First off, Houston, top 5 implied team total. We expect a lot of points to be scored here. Both of his games against the Colts last year, he scored 20 or more fantasy points. He averaged 324 passing yards per game, and that was without Stephon Diggs, who joins the team this year, obviously. Colts allowed the 7th highest completion rate on deep passes last year. You already heard me talk up Mixon. I think they're going to be able to use play action very effectively in this game as well. So on the road, at the Colts, in the Dome, on the turf, give me C.J. Stroud as a top 5 play this week.
Yeah. You know what happened last time we saw the Indianapolis Colts play an NFL game? They got completely eviscerated by C.J. Stroud, who did, from the first play of the game, that bomb to Nico Collins, he did whatever he wanted against the Colts. I don't understand how the Colts were just cool with going into the season with like Juju Brents as their number 1 boundary corner, but it seems like that's the life they want to live, and I don't think they're going to have any answers for Stroud, just like they didn't have any answers for him in Week 18 last year.
Yeah, the Colts hoping they could lean on their pass rush, but that Texans offensive line, when it's healthy, they can pass protect for days. How about Jordan Love against the Eagles, Jay? The Eagles allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to quarterbacks in 2023, and something we talk about on this show constantly is the second half of Jordan Love was a totally different player.
Yeah, he was. He seemed to figure it out in the second half of the season and did it against some good defenses as well. It wasn't just flat track bullying it. And the Eagles, been a lot of buzz about their defense with Vic Fangio coming in, drafting guys like Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, maybe a little bit more health on defense with their older corners, although Bradbury's already down. Not sure how much role he's going to play this year. Slay, hopefully healthier. But, let's just see it. Let's see the defense be improved first, because, it was about the worst defense in the league in the back half of last year.
Yeah, Matthew, a lot of questions still about the Eagles secondary, as you pointed out earlier. We'll see if Jordan Love can take advantage of that with the Brazil game.
I think he will be able to. The other thing about Vic Fangio that you got to remember, he likes to blitz. He calls an aggressive game, and so what does that mean? Maybe are there some more runs? That when the pressure gets to him. Jordan Love obviously has some wheels, and so he can use his legs to get you some fantasy points. There's also going to be some when you blitz and you take chances, sometimes you got guys in single coverage. Remember, the Eagles last year, top 5 in terms of most receptions allowed on deep passes. So they're going to take some deep shots here. Jordan Love, by the way, and the Packers, 2nd most deep attempts last year. They're going to take some deep shots, I think, and I think they're going to connect on a couple of those. So given the inexperience of some of the secondary, given his legs, given the, honestly, Jordan Love's talent and his propensity to throw deep, I think he has a big game here. I'm as a top 10 play this week. He's actually my QB7 in week 1.
Mike Evans on the love list side of things for the Bucs. Jayden Daniels on the love list side of things for the Commanders in a game, Matthew, that you said, hey, there could be some breakdowns, there could be some scoring. We get to see the Jayden Daniels era begin.
Well, exactly. I mean, he's all that they've got. They're going to have to push the ball because I don't think they're going to be able to stop the Buccaneers. So they're going to have to just unleash Jayden Daniels. It's worth noting that only one team in the NFL allowed more rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks last year than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were also bottom 5 in terms of receptions and yards allowed on deep passes last year. We know Jayden Daniels likes to chuck it deep. By the way, Kyler Murray, in 3 of his first 6 games as a rookie under Cliff Kingsbury, of course, the Commanders' offensive coordinator now, he scored 20 or more fantasy points. And so I do think on the road at Tampa Bay, he has a nice debut as a fantasy superstar, Jayden Daniels. Give me a top 10 finish this week for Jayden Daniels.
Yeah, I think there's the idea that the Bucs have a good defense because of how good they looked against the Eagles in the playoff game, and Todd Bowles is a defensive coach. Like, there are elements of the defense that are really good. Like, the run defense has been consistently excellent. Antoine Winfield is awesome in the back end. But to Matthew's point, like, this team gave up a ton of explosive plays last year. They don't really have a pass rush.
That's
Their number
the
one
key.
edge rusher is going to be like Yaya Diaby.
Yep.
So think about how like CJ Stroud completely lit this team up last year. Derek Carr lit this team up in week 17 last year. So I think that if he's on, like, there is a lot of upside here for explosive plays.
I think so too. You brought up the pass rush, Jay. You're absolutely right. That's the question with the Bucs. And as much as we talk about, hey, there's some questions on the Commanders' offensive line, this is a game where they can protect Jayden Daniels because of the lack of pass rush from the Bucs. So it could be a huge day for him, and that's why he's on the love list for Matthew here. Some others receiving votes: Baker Mayfield, who will relentlessly look wherever Emmanuel Forbes is on the field, Matthew, and then Matthew Stafford against the Lions. We know that game will mean a little more, as it always will.
No team allowed more fantasy points or more passing touchdowns last year than the Washington Commanders. Baker should have a really nice day. He's my top 12. He's my QB 12 for the week. And also Stafford, we already talked about this. 351 yards the last time. 367 yards when he played Detroit in the playoffs last year as well. Lions bottom 6 in both passing yards and passing touchdowns allowed. They have a 51. The over-under is the highest on the week 1 slate. We expect a lot of fireworks again on Sunday night on NBC and Peacock. I'm a company man, and so Stafford should have to throw to keep up with Jared Goff and the Lions. I think Matthew Stafford is a top 15 play this week.
Jay, when you look at that, I mean, it seems like it's great for all the wide receivers we talk about in those games, not just Mike Evans, but Chris Godwin. And we talk about the, Puka Nacua versus Cooper Kupp, but it feels like week 1, both can eat plenty.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Rams, Detroit total is in the 50s,
Right.
51.5. So, and I suspect that Detroit, they're 3.5-point favorites. You expect them to be leading. We saw Stafford playing from behind in the last game the Rams played in that playoff game against Detroit, and he put up massive numbers. And I think all season, Kupp and Nacua, we're consistently going to be seeing these guys put up, like, one of them has 80 yards, the other has 110. They both have 90. Like, these guys are both going to be able to produce all season.
Move over to the hate list for quarterbacks. Brock Purdy on the hate list with that matchup against the Jets. We talked about all the problems, Matthew, with Brandon Aiyuk going into this game. It was not a great summer for Brock Purdy. Hopefully, for his sake, he has Trent Williams in full, but we know how good this Jets defense is.
I mean, it's a bad matchup just to begin with, right? Second best pass defense in the NFL last year, the New York Jets, right? The third lowest passer rating allowed last year, the New York Jets, right? Quarterbacks averaged 12.1 fantasy points per game last year against the Jets. That was best in the NFL. So even in a perfect circumstance, it's not a great matchup for Brock Purdy. But then you get to the fact that, as Jay mentioned, he has looked terrible this preseason. We don't know how much of Brandon Aiyuk he'll have. We don't know how much of Trent Williams he'll have. This doesn't feel great. Feels like if I'm Kyle Shanahan, this is a big Chris McCaffrey game. Try to just limit Brock Purdy, what he's doing. Try to control the clock here and create mismatches. So don't love Purdy this week. He's my QB 16, outside my top 15 for the week.
Another element here, Jay, is that, you often say with Purdy, I wish he would run more, because when he does, it's very effective. It's hard to scramble against. Quincy Williams was an all-pro linebacker last year. He's maybe the fastest linebacker in the league. It just feels like Purdy could have a fine game for the Niners to win it, but from a fantasy perspective, his options here are severely limited.
Yeah, and I just worry a little bit. I think Purdy was magnificent last year. I think Purdy's a very good quarterback who gets a really rough deal overall. But he did struggle against elite defenses last year in a way that I'm not sure that the way he plays is as resilient against great defenses as some of the other elite quarterbacks in the NFL. Against the Browns last year, outdoors, he was 12 of 27, really struggled in the rain. We all know what happened on Christmas Day against the Ravens, where he throws the 4 picks. He's 18 of 32. And I think the other elite defense that he played was probably Kansas City in the Super Bowl. He was fine in the Super Bowl, but he wasn't amazing. He was 23 of 38, and now he gets the Jets team that is very much in the caliber of those defenses. So this is a great test for Brock Purdy. Like, we're going to see, prime time going up against Sauce Gardner and that defense. This is a great test. And with all that we've seen and with the concerns over Trent Williams and Brandon Aiyuk, could get ugly.
The other quarterback here, Matthew, Dak Prescott, just a brutal draw for the Cowboys out of the gate, not only playing that Cleveland defense, but more importantly, maybe traveling to play at Cleveland.
Yeah, that's a key point. Dak Prescott so much worse on the road last year, where he averaged 16 fantasy points per game versus the almost 25 that he averaged at home last year. So significant difference between Dak at home versus Dak on the road. And now he's got to go to Cleveland against a defense that was elite last year, especially at home. Worth noting, they were top 2 in the NFL in terms of highest pressure rate, lowest yards per attempt allowed, and second lowest passer rating allowed. The other thing here is just on a narrative base, I don't think Dak's going to have to do that much to win this game. I don't think all of a sudden the Browns, under Deshaun Watson, who's also looked bad this preseason and may not be 100% healthy against an elite Cowboys defense, the Browns aren't going to be putting up tons of points in this one. So it's not like Dak is all of a sudden going to be I got to throw it 45 times because we got to put up 35 points. This is going to be an ugly, low-scoring game, and I think there's possibly a defensive touchdown for the Cowboys as well, or short field position. I just don't see Dak lighting up the Browns for a lot of reasons. So he makes the hate list this week. He's my QB 17.
Yeah, I think there were 2 games all season last year where Dak went on the road outdoors against a good defense. And what he did in those games, Buffalo towards the end of the season in a game that cost him the MVP, they had 3 points all game up until a garbage time touchdown with 3 minutes to go, 134 yards, 1 interception, no touchdowns. And then San Francisco, that earlier season game on Sunday Night Football, in that game, 153 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. Now, overall the season he was fantastic, but he did it against a lot of bad teams indoors a lot of the time too. Don't want to take too much away from Dak because people like to beat up on Dak, and he was great last year, but this is going to be a test. This is as hard as it gets. If you could drop one matchup in a lab to make Dak Prescott look bad, probably outdoors on the road against Cleveland.
And guys, maybe the most underrated storyline of this game is, and I have a lot of faith in Tyler Guyton, their first-round pick for the long haul, but how long Tyron Smith has been there protecting Dak Prescott, keeping him upright. Now you have a young Dallas offensive line, specifically a tackle. Who do you get introduced to in the NFL? Myles Garrett.
How good do you think Guyton and BB are going to be from the start?
I think it's going to be a little bit of an up and down. He was somebody that he was originally an H-back at TCU. He transfers to Oklahoma, turns into a really good tackle prospect, but very athletic and gifted, and technique needed to be coached up. Dallas is excellent at coaching up raw offensive linemen, but I think of a couple years ago, Ike Ekwonu, who was a top 5 pick. He got introduced to the NFL by Myles Garrett. I think Myles Garrett had 2 sacks against him. Any rookie offensive line, this is the last guy you want to see. Especially, he's athletic enough, but are you strong enough and technically sound enough out of the gate? That's a huge ask for anyone.
Yep. What about Cooper Beebe, who's going to look like starting at center?
He's the guy that I'm most excited about because you can run behind him. He's just so good in the phone booth. He can help out Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott get downhill, which is what they want this running game to be. So the Dallas offensive line is going to be in a good place. But when you're going from a Hall of Famer on that left side for that long to anyone else, it's tough. It's a tough bar to climb to.
Yep.
All right. It's time to choose your lineup here, brought to you by Jameson. Join our unofficial call to try to get pro football to Dublin. Visit jamesonsports.com for more. Little choose your lineup, Barry. We got 4 flex picks, 1 at each spot here for week 1. Who do you like in these spots?
Yeah, just if you're sitting there, you have somebody you don't have a good matchup, maybe you're a little nervous here, but here's some borderline guys that I think will have good weeks in week 1, and it's Jared Goff against the Rams. He's my QB 13. Again, we talked about what an high implied team total that is. We think that's going to be a bit of a shootout. Rams last year allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to quarterbacks. How about Tyjae Spears on the road at Chicago? Bears did allow the most receiving yards to running backs last season. I think both Pollard and Spears have top 40 days in them at Chicago, especially if DeAndre Hopkins isn't able to go. we already talked about how much we think Tampa Bay is going to just blow up Washington. Well, that means they're going to have to throw. I like Jayden Daniels this week, and who's he looking for? Terry McLaurin. In the games last year, we had a target share above 23%, and that's what he's going to have this week. He's averaging 16.5 fantasy points per game. Remember, the Buccaneers last year allowed the 4th most yards to wide receivers. And finally, if you need a tight end, how about Taysom Hill, Denny Carter's guy, his nomination for my ride or die. I'm not doing that, but it's worth noting that no team in the NFL allowed more rushing touchdowns than the Carolina Panthers. And last year, Taysom Hill handled 31% of the Saints' red zone rushes, 26% of their goal line rushes. Kendre Miller's hurt. Jamal Williams doesn't seem that effective. How much does Alvin Kamara get at the goal line? They want to use Taysom Hill. They used him a lot of different creative ways in the preseason. I want to see what Clint Kubiak does, but I think there's a chance that, especially given the matchup against Carolina, that Taysom Hill falls into the end zone here. I like him as tight end 15 if you need somebody as well. Again, those are some guys that, again, if you're sort of looking in the flex range, if you're a little bit desperate, slightly deeper league, I like this week.
Jay, considering how high Jayden Daniels' stock has risen in fantasy, I know a lot of it is the rushing upside. I get that, but this is an elite deep ball thrower, by the way. We saw that right away in the preseason against the Jets. It's a little surprising how underappreciated or undervalued Terry McLaurin has become, especially Jahan Dotson's traded. There's just not a lot in this wide receiver room.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he is the one guy there. He's seemingly going to be used very consistently. It kind of became memeable how Cliff Kingsbury was just putting him in the same spot in the preseason repeatedly. But, I mean, to your point, like, Jayden Daniels, the concern about him is that sometimes he can bail on plays a little bit too early and then not work in the middle of the field enough. Like with Terry McLaurin, if he's throwing deep balls to Terry McLaurin, I don't really understand why like Anthony Richardson is going so much higher in drafts than Jayden Daniels. Like, I think there's a huge chance that Jayden Daniels outperforms Anthony Richardson, and he's probably going to have to be playing from behind a bit with that defense. So Jaden McDaniels, Terry McLaurin, I think they'll both have monster seasons.
We're going to take one more break here. Well, go ahead, Matthew.
Commander's thought.
I was just gonna say to that point about, and to the point that Jay's making about how memeable it's been, just people making fun of the fact that McLaurin basically lined up in the same spot for every single snap in the preseason. Even with that, DeAndre Hopkins, who got sort of a similar treatment in Arizona under Cliff Kingsbury, was still a top 10 fantasy wide receiver under Cliff Kingsbury. Like, I just think McLaurin is a good enough route runner. He is fast enough, and Daniels is a talented enough thrower that McLaurin is going to get his. Again, he's going to get a massive target share on a team, to your point, Connor and Jay, that is going to have to throw quite a bit. I wrote this in my Glove Hate column that's coming out today. We talked about it a little bit yesterday as well. People are going to be shocked at how much they have to use Zach Ertz in this offense, at least early on. You'll see Tyjae Brown. You'll see some Luke McCaffrey. But, it should be a big target share for Terry McLaurin, and then both Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler out of the backfield. I think you'll be surprised at how much both those guys touch the ball.
Just on the Cliff point, like, Cliff Kingsbury's not stupid. Like, he's doing it for a reason, and you might think that it might not work, it might not be the right reason, but it's not like definitely going to fail. Like, he's doing it for a purpose. And to your point, Matthew, like, it did work with DeAndre Hopkins. By the end of his time in Arizona, Kingsbury was moving Hopkins around a little bit more. I don't think McLaurin's just going to be in the same spot every single play, running the exact same route. Like, he can run different routes from the same starting spot. So, yeah, I think Terry McLaurin is pretty high floor and probably higher ceiling than most people think.
We got one more break. When we're back, our best bets for the first game of the season. Coming up right after this. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns, and new customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets instantly. Plus, get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Download the app and use promo code Barry when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours.
It's not very synced up there, Matthew.
I kind of
like what I feel like we need to do?
Okay.
Yeah, and I also feel like, what we need? Like, like when we talk about Peacock, we've got caca.
Oh, you've got that.
I feel like with
yes.
I feel like how everyone in America has embraced the caca. I feel like for DraftKings Sportsbook and the crown is yours, we needed like a king thing, like doo doo doo.
Like a clanging sound of a crown.
It won't be that. Whatever sound you just
just
made,
like
it won't be that,
a little crown. A little.
When they had like the bugles
Your
walk
Majesty
in next
sort
to
of
them.
thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Bugles. Okay.
All right. Well, we'll see who has the crown for that. Last call. How about our most bet props for Ravens Chiefs? The opener tonight. Zay Flowers receptions over under set at 4.5 right now. That's -135. The screen machine, Zay Flowers, thanks to Todd Monken. Derrick Henry rushing yards 50 plus, minus 265, coward bet. Derrick Henry rushing yards, 60 plus, minus 145. Isaiah Pacheco rushing yards, 50 plus, minus 215. These are the most bet props. Travis Kelce receiving yards, 50 plus, minus 175. Jay, do you have something just somewhat riskier to me?
Yeah, America very risk averse.
Oh my goodness!
Digging into
It's
the
week one, let loose.
265s. Yeah, I have a little. Well, I mean, it's not super wild, but Derrick Henry over 65.5 rushing yards is minus 115. I just have a general rule in life, and that's that Derrick Henry can never be set below 70 rushing yards. Chiefs last year were 28th. In EPA per play against the run. They've just never had a good run defense. Just doesn't get exposed because teams are playing from behind so often. But there's this idea that, like, oh, Derrick Henry is going to be scaled back. Like, last time we saw Derrick Henry, he was going for 150 plus yards against the Jags and a touchdown with their season on the line. The Jags, that is. So I think that Derrick Henry still has plenty of juice left in the tank. Derrick Henry's 30 years old. He's younger than Connor Rogers. Look how young Connor Rogers looks. I think Derrick Henry's going to have a massive year. I think he's going to ball out in the season opener, and he'll go for over 65.5 yards.
Matthew, what do you got for us?
All right, listen, obviously a lot of big names, right? You got Lamar Jackson, you got Patrick Mahomes, you got Derrick Henry, Pacheco, Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice, Zay Flowers. So obviously where I'm going is Justin Watson. Yeah. Over 15.5 receiving yards today. Look, Justin Watt, he's hit this number 7 of the last 9 games, including the playoffs and including the game against the Ravens in the playoffs last year as well. He's going to play a lot of snaps. Xavier Worthy's a rookie. I think he's going to be somewhat limited. No Hollywood Brown tonight as well. So Justin Watson's going to be out there quite a bit. Again, all he needs is one. He's hit this number 7 of 9. He needs to hold on to it. Watson and the drops are always a challenge, but give me the over 15.5 receiving yards for Justin Watson.
Yeah, Matthew, I'm looking at these Chiefs wide receivers as well. I like the very creative thought of Justin Watson, especially at that low total. I'll take the chalk with Rashee Rice over 61.5 yards at minus 115. I mean, it's as simple as this, Jay. He's a number 1 wide receiver in their offense. They're not going to be careful with Travis Kelce week 1, but they'll be careful with him this season. I think Rashee Rice in a couple weeks, this will be closer to 75.5, 80 yards a week.
Yep, Ravens pass defense has a few questions. Mike McDonald obviously gone. No more Jadeveon Clowney. Might be a bit more, not weak, but it could be a bit more exposed than last year.
Matthew, quick closing thoughts. Have you got boots on the ground in Kansas City for the opener?
I think it's going to be a great game. I think the Chiefs win, but I think Pacheco and Henry are a big part of tonight's game.
All right.
Can't wait to be back there with
Matthew
tomorrow
in
with
Kansas
you guys.
City. We're back tomorrow. Enjoy the game.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotorWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.